I'm an Israeli-American artist based in New York City. My practice, I would say, is interdisciplinary, working across sculpture, video, and installation. I like to think of my practice as thinking a lot about aesthetic systems of power that are embedded within architecture, primarily coming out of Israel, Palestine, and the United States. And I think a lot of the themes are fairly universal. I grew up in Israel in the 1990s, and a lot of that experience kind of comes out with my distance from home. Anytime I go to a place and then I leave it, I get a new perspective of that environment. And Israel in particular has been something that kind of arrives back and comes back to me constantly with parallels that I see in American culture as well. While I've been at the Bemis, I've really been focusing on two projects, I would say. One is accessibility. I really have been thinking about structures of power and control and how they affect bodies and our experience of space, and who has access to different environments and who has control over those spaces. So while I've been here, part one of what I've been doing is adding image description to my website, as well as image captioning and thinking about alternative text. Yeah, alternative text is something that you can add to your website. So that all my images, when someone who has a visual inaccessibility to the digital world, they can get a text that is read out to them that explains the image in front of them. I think it's important to provide alternative text to all my images that doesn't only describe what's there, but also gives a sense of what it would be to be in front of it. Again, it's not just a mechanism for me to offer accessibility, but for me becomes a conceptual part of the work. And then I've also extended that to thinking about sculpture and how is sculpture accessible to all different types of bodies. That's led me down a line of thinking about public sculpture and how a body enters a space, how it interacts with the architecture of an environment. So I'm looking primarily at ADA accessible ramps as a starting point. And then I've been building these small scale models based off of architectures of power, such as watchtowers and the panopticon, which is a type of jail architecture. Really thinking about what it means to democratize the power of vision and flatten it to be accessible to all bodies. And then another part is an installation project that I've been working on while here for an upcoming exhibition in New York. And that also relates to thinking about watchtowers and these structures of power and control, but more around the basement space as a safe space and what it means in American culture, but also in Israeli culture, and how it transfers. So while I've been at the Bemis, I've noticed there's a lot of basement spaces here for protection against a different kind of threat, which is the tornado, where in Israel it's perceived existential threat. In the United States now in general, also thinking about nuclear explosion and environmental threats. And with that project, I'm also thinking about relationships of power to these spaces and who are the players in different environments that give access and agency to the body within that environment. So I work in many different ways. I tend to make small models and I make installations and kind of sets that move between installation and sculpture. And I've always been interested in what happens then when you take a three-dimensional object and flatten it on a screen, how that experience of space transforms from your physical body being actually present to this facade that is presented through a screen. For example, I've worked in the past by making like an optical illusion space sculpture, but for me it's really about using these cheap tricks that I think are used in film but also used in reality and are meant to make us feel like they're real, but they're so clearly not that it's like a joke. This ridiculousness that is already present all around us.